I woke up this morning and got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one. One in a million, I believe I'm gonna burn to shine. I was born under a bad sign with a blue moon in my eye. And I woke
Hey, welcome to Framework. I am Al Schwartz. Joining me today, our returning luminary, Chris Prentice.
Hey, how you doing, Al? How's it going?
That's going good. We're continuing our Sopranos rewatch series here. We're up into season 4. I think this is a little mixed reactions to this season from the fandom, as I recall.
Yes. I think this was kind of the ultimate season in sort of delaying gratification. I think that this was mostly a lot of setup for things to come later on. Obviously there are some exceptions. I mean, but really, I think that it wasn't what I think audiences were really looking for. It was much more about sort of the domestic side. At least that's how it ends. That's kind of the big blow up of the
Mhm.
season. And I think at the time this was kind of seen as sort of well, this season's okay, but hopefully the next one will be better.
Yeah, it seems to me this is when people started to feel antsy for the first time.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it wasn't, I mean, it seemed like to a certain extent people could accept some delayed gratification, but this one, especially the mob side of things, like you said, the domestic side really blows up. Is
Oh
as
yeah.
explosive as any of that stuff ever gets at the end of the season. But the mob storylines kind of peter out at the end. They peak. I don't know, around episode 9, let's say, but we'll get to that one specifically in a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
But between the I guess Carmine, New York whacking a boss storyline and the Furio stuff, uh, both sort of the fuse is getting snuffed out before the bombs go off on either of those things. I think that made people a lot antsier.
Yeah. I mean, there's early on in the season, there is so much tension because you think, oh, okay, it's going to be either Johnny getting whacked or Ralphie's going to get whacked. And oh, here we go. And then it doesn't happen.
Well,
And
and
then,
Polly's sort of, you
right.
know, becoming putting himself in danger by with his loose lips.
Oh, yeah.
Christopher's drug problem spiraling out, and they're raising the possibility that they'll have to snuff him out uh, over that.
Yeah. So it's like there's so much, oh, I think this is going to finally be where this person goes. And it just
Mhm.
doesn't happen. And then even in the back half of the season, it's so much about, oh, okay, they got to whack Carmine. This is what we've been waiting for. Or there's going to be a big struggle with New York, and then it just kind of all gets like, Carmine, he'll take the deal. He's going to settle, and that just kind of wraps it up.
Mhm.
And so all of that I think led to sort of the audience reaction at the time being one of being slightly let down by this one, even though there's wall to wall great episodes throughout this season.
Yeah, well, I think there's some real highlights here, and this is a contrast to season 3 to me. And partly I think the reason why maybe uh, the audiences were getting more impatient here is because up to season 1 and 2, uh, the mob storylines did pay off. At the
Yeah.
end of the season, there was sort of a confrontation or at least a resolution. Even the season 2, it's sort of elided the big head-to-head confrontation, but it's still
Yes.
done in a very satisfying way. Season 3 is the first time when they kind of strung that out across a season, where it seemed like Ralphie was the main antagonist of that season. Everybody expected him to get his at the end, and when that didn't
Right.
happen, I think people came into this already kind of drumming their fingers, trying to maintain their patience.
Well, and I think another big issue at the time was this. There was a way bigger gap in between season 3 and season 4 than there had previously been. It was about a year and a half in between season 3 and season 4, whereas in the past it was
You're
maybe
right.
about a 9 month wait. And so I think that was another thing, is that people were just so amped up for this show to come back, and so it would have been impossible to kind of meet those expectations, because this was really kind of the height of the show's placement in pop culture back then.
Yeah, it had built up its head of steam the way
Hmm.
that sort of you could feel something kind of palpably different between like I'd say seasons 3 and 4 of Breaking Bad, where
Oh yeah.
the first couple seasons, people it was building a following, and then that people got caught up and
Oh right.
obsessed, especially when there's a cliffhanger ending there to deal with. And Sopranos doesn't really deal in cliffhanger endings. I mean, uh, that's not going to pick up right after,
Right. They're all
one
about
episode into the
they're,
next.
they're all about denying the cliffhanger. They're the anti cliffhanger show. I will say that even though I do like this season, that the, basically there's this season has both my least favorite episode and my least favorite subplot of the entire series. I'll just say first,
Hmm.
I think Christopher is probably the worst episode of the series. It's
Okay.
it's a good idea. I like the idea of the mobsters kind of coming to grips with how Christopher Columbus is treated now, and so there's that's a good idea. I just thought the execution was so bad. There's just so many moments in that episode where it's like they're kind of going for laughs that just do not work at all. And yeah, it's just bad. There's, oh my gosh. And then there's like that fake talk show segment that Montel Williams hosts, and it's just the whole episode. It's like, why is Montel Williams on The Sopranos? It's just bizarre.
Because The Sopranos was cool at the time. Yeah.
Ah,
um,
man, it's like I know earlier in the show they had Geraldo do a fake show, and I don't know,
yeah.
that one's made a little more sense. I just the Montel Williams part is just I watched that at that moment again recently. It's like, this is bad. This is so bad.
Well, you have the weight of culture on your side here because I think Christopher is pretty widely recognized as the
Yeah.
worst episode of the series. I disagree. I've been
Okay.
just as I go tracking, just keeping a list of every time I finish an episode on the rewatch, putting it in between. Like, all right, where did I put this? And uh, so I've got a list of the first four seasons worth of episodes in order, and I have 3 episodes behind Christopher,
Okay.
um, including one of season 4, which I think it's the one later where he whips Zelma with a belt, and that one,
Oh wait, you're gonna put
the
that
the
among the
the, the,
worst?
the crack house stuff there is badly done. I feel.
I
Uh,
don't. I Wow. See, I really disagree. I love that episode. I mean, mainly because for two reasons. I just think
you
it's a
like
very.
Peter Reeder?
I like him. Yeah, I just think it's an interesting scam because they don't usually go as in depth into all of their schemes. Like a lot of times when they're talking about their construction stuff, I'm kind of like, all right, whatever. I mean, I guess I understand what's going on here. That's good enough. But I really like that they really kind of went in deep with how this whole scheme worked, and so that I found that interesting. And yeah, I think the ending with Tony beating Zellman above anyone Tony even killed, I think that's the worst. That's the worst we've seen from Tony. I just thought that moment is him at his most deranged, and that moment just always sticks out at me as being kind of his the peak of his evil.
Yeah, that's part of it, and it's coming around the heels of the Artie episode where attempts suicide,
Oh yeah,
and it's like a couple episodes in a row, like some of the toughest stuff to watch that the show ever put out. Like for me, it's even worse, and this probably doesn't speak well to me, to my character, but like
yeah.
even harder than some of the terrible violence against women in the third season is that because I don't know that stuff. It's
Yeah, there's
just
something about beating a man with a belt in front of his woman. That is just, I mean,
Yeah, he's in his underwear and like
yeah.
crying and begging. It's
Well,
uh,
what's funny is on the Talkin' Sopranos podcast, they interviewed Peter Riegert, and
mhm,
he explained that that scene, the way it was originally written, he was supposed to be naked in that scene,
mhm.
and he had some real problems with that. He said, I don't need to be naked here. It's pretty, the message gets across pretty well,
Yeah,
just with him beating the hell out of me in my underwear. And I guess that kind of caused a rift between him and David Chase. And he mentioned that, like, that Gandolfini kind of was in Riegert's corner and said, I'll back you, however you want to do
yeah.
this. But I just think, man, it's like, it's crazy how just above anything else Tony ever did, that just has always struck me as the most evil. But that's also what leads to the downfall of his marriage, because
It does. I do like the way that sort of that string of fallout occurs.
exactly, because Zellman can no longer be with Irina. Irina, in a drunken stupor, calls Carmela, lets her know about Svetlana, and that's basically what leads to the whole dust up at the end.
Yeah. Well, and it's also that she only finds out about Svetlana because Svetlana's having a dispute about how to fill out a tax form
Yeah.
for the other nurse. That I love that little detail.
Yeah.
Uh, but you know what? I wanted to get back talking about Christopher.
Okay.
That because I that I found that episode funnier on rewatch than I remembered it being, and I think they're not something there. Like it's outdated at this point. It's 2004 culture war stuff, and the whole concept of identity politics has moved many turns down the line since then. But I'd like something about it there that I think that the episode's kind of astute about uh, is the way the Italian mobsters sort of adopt the pose of uh, downtrodden minorities when it suits them,
Oh yeah.
while also fully taking advantage of being on the white side of the ledger when it suits them.
Well, yeah, like they're always talking about, oh, our grandparents had it so tough. They came here with
Yeah,
nothing. They built lives out of nothing. That's how the way to live. That's how you do it. Meanwhile, they're all murderers and robbers, and they're
yeah,
grifting everyone. There is funny stuff in the episode. I mean, kind of what the opening, when they're all kind of first discussing what's going on with the Columbus holiday, is there's a lot of good laughs there. So I mean, there are good moments, and like I said, I think it's a good idea. I just think, but like when it gets to the scene where they have like kind of the picketing, where it's like the Native American side against the mobster side, it just kind of gets a little too farcical.
it does, but it gives us the great John Ventimiglia like physical performance when he gets
That's
hit by
funny.
like a slushy cup
Yeah,
and
that was
ducks
funny.
back into the car.
That
That's
that's the
the
high
scene there
point.
that kills me. That may have suddenly become my funniest episode or scene of the series when I was rewatching this is in a completely unintentional way. I think maybe not completely, but the scene where the woman talks to the Carmela's church group about like Italian American pride,
Oh yes.
and she's going on about how like when they say spaghetti and meatballs, you say orchietta with broccoli rabe. And,
Yeah.
and when they say Gotti, you say Giuliani, which has become funny, like in
Oh,
retrospect, that
sure,
now
sure.
Giuliani, not so much known for being anti-crime these days.
No.
Uh, but the the orchietta with broccoli rabe thing, for some reason, has just been tickling me for like 2 weeks now. Where the premise here is incredible to me that she's like, okay, okay, you're gonna be arguing with somebody about Italian American identity and pride. And look, eventually you're just going to be yelling pastas at each other. Like it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
It's gonna happen. It's probably gonna happen faster than you want, but you just gotta come armed with the right pasta to yell
all.
at them, and then you can win.
Yeah, all roads lead to pasta. I, I
Like I'm
do.
just trying to put myself in the shoes of the anti-Italian person here, where I'm gonna just be like, it's once we're yelling past each other, it's like a Pokemon battle, right? You
That's
just have
it.
to like have brought the right defense against it. I'm like,
You're
oh
probably not
no,
going to be armed well enough.
right? I was going to be caught flat-footed if I'm like, oh, I came prepared for Rotini Primavera, but I didn't see Fusilli con Gabrielli coming. No, I am vanquished.
Yeah, it's like it's not all bad. There is, like I said, it's like I think the idea is good. I do like the end scene when they're in the car driving back from the casino, and Tony kind of goes into his spiel about Gary Cooper, the strong silent type, whatever happened to that, and it just kind of turns into a pretty funny conversation, and just how bitter Silvio is, and then you got Chris in the back, and with Philly, and they're just kind of keeping their mouths shut. They don't want to really get involved. It's a good ending to the episode, but it's my least favorite one.
I do. The funniest part there is that Silvio's all bitter because after all the fuss he kicked up, he forgot what day the parade was on because they got
Yeah,
invited
yeah, yeah.
to go to a casino and be comped,
Well, and I like
which is hysterical.
how ticked off that Tony is that because he went to the casino, he basically got strong armed into trying to get Frankie Valli to perform at the casino, and it basically just the whole episode just ends with Tony telling Silvio, "You take it up with Frankie Valli when you talk to him."
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird one too. Tony actually, I mean, you don't. You, maybe the reason why it doesn't sit right with people is that Tony does give sort of like almost a South Park style like summary lecture about the cultural issue
Yeah,
du jour there. I kind of like that. What Tony actually is more likable, as he's at least the one trying to say like you can't have it both ways. And
you're right.
like,
He is in a weird way the voice of reason,
mhm.
compared to everyone else uh, within that episode. It's just I don't know. There's just so many clunky parts and just clunky bit. And the bit with Ralphie going to talk to the Native American leader.
Mhm.
That's a bad scene right there. It's just, I mean, it's like maybe on paper that it sounded funny, but it just isn't for a show that really hits the comedic bullseye almost all the time. I thought they were just way off on this one.
Yeah. Well, let me. Speaking of hitting the comedic bullseye, one of my other favorite episodes of the series that I don't think gets enough credit uh, is episode 10 of the season, which is the strong silent type.
Oh yes,
Uh, this is mostly what you remember it for. Is it's the episode where Christopher gets an intervention,
yeah, yeah.
and that is
This
probably just my favorite scene of the series.
Oh yeah, that's definitely way up there. I think it's a great guest turn from Elias Koteas as
Oh
the
yeah.
former mobster slash thief, now turned professional counselor, intervention runner, whatever type of job that is. But yeah, oh my god, it's hysterical. I mean, there's so many awesome moments in that. I mean, I like when they're all kind of reading off all their problems to Chris and kind of explaining to him what's wrong with him and why they're there, and Adriana gets into how he can no longer function as a man. And there's just a quick
As
cut
a
to
man.
Paulie, who just kind of makes this face. It's like I don't even know how to really describe the face. It's almost a mixture of of happy but embarrassed at the same time. It's like he doesn't want to hear it, but he's kind of happy that he heard it, but he's also embarrassed to be hearing it. It's funny. It's great.
Oh yeah, he's great. And then Silvio's description of just like monotone reading the thing about Christopher's hair in the toilet water is
Yes.
great too.
Yes. Your hair was
Tony's
in the water. Disgusting.
yeah,
I've said my piece.
disgusting.
Oh yeah.
But it's like I'm sure the if Elias Koteas' counselor had read their notes beforehand, probably would have crossed just the word disgusting off the end. Like we don't need to just editorialize that bit.
Well,
But
and the other thing is that I love is that for that whole scene, Furio and Benny are there in the background, and
yeah,
it's like you wouldn't really think. I mean, yeah, okay, I guess they work with Christopher, but they're seemingly just there for muscle. It's like that's the only purpose that they serve is just okay. It's at some point this is going to go haywire, and that's when you guys come in because I'm sure they didn't really have much to say about Christopher's way of life at that moment.
yeah. I assume that they were there to stop him from leaving. Uh,
Yeah,
but, but they're also there more so that they're when it devolves into a big beatdown at the end, there's more people to like go kick him. Then it wouldn't feel entirely right if it's Tony and Silvio doing it.
no, no, no. It's yeah. There's just a lot of little touches in that scene that are so good, and then you do get Christopher bringing up the Russian from season three. So I think people at least enjoyed that being referenced at the time because it had been pretty much something that nobody had spoken of since that episode. So that's another little moment that's fun in that one. So oh yeah, that is definitely if you're gonna do just single scenes from the whole series, that one is way up there.
Yeah, and the other great thing that's running through that episode is that Tony spends the entire episode in mourning for a horse.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
which in the intervention scene, he turns from like being the most sympathetic to Christopher in the room to like berating him and threatening to throttle him when he hears that Christopher sat on Adriana's
on
dog,
his dog. Yeah, yeah. He
and the animal thinks
really
it's moved.
he really flips out on I mean that's it's almost like Tony is pretty annoyed to be there until that moment, and then it's like he kind of has skin in the game once he hears about the dog.
Yeah. Well, there's a great hysterical bit earlier where that it's also a thing that I've talked about earlier. The Sopranos doing sort of like smash cut jokes, except that they don't actually smash cut to them. In this
No.
case, they actually do it. Where he goes out to the car. Furio's just got back from Italy for his dad's funeral. And Furio's in the car crying over Carmela, really. But Tony's like, "What's the matter with you?" And he's like, "I'm sad for my father who just died." And Tony's
Yeah.
like, kind of annoyed and like, "All right, but you got to get over that stuff. And then it smash cuts to him in Melfi's office, full blown weeping over a
Yeah.
horse.
That's yes. That is pretty good. Um, but yeah, that kind of segues into my other issue with the season, and that is
Right.
this season has, like I said mentioned earlier, my least favorite subplot with the Carmela and Furio stuff. I just that I don't buy any of that. It is just oh man, I just all those scenes, that stupid song that they always play. I mean, I just don't like any of it. It's like I can okay, I can sort of
Hey now, that that
understand.
was that was an offensive impression of an Italian opera singer. Right? Don't make me start listing high end pastas at you.
That wasn't really. That's not even really opera. It's like some dance music. It's almost like club music in Italy or something. It's just. It's just. Oh my god! It's so bad. And it's like I can sort of understand Carmela's side because they kind of fiddled with this in season two, where she sort of had a crush
Mhm.
on the drywall,
The
the
contractor
interior. Yeah,
guy.
the
Yeah.
contractor, the guy from Jake and the Fat Man. So that kind of made Joe Penny. That kind of made some sense. Okay, I can see where maybe Carmela would develop this attraction. I just never bought that there would be any kind of reciprocation from Furio, and it's like it's such a to me what a lame way to lose Furio from the show. It's like okay, people they get their brains bashed in, they get shot in the head. All right, that's just the way the show goes, but oh, he's going to disappear because he had an attraction to Carmela and she did as well. It's like, it's just a bad way to lose a character that I really liked.
So I agree with you on a lot of the component parts here, but I kind of like the storyline overall
Yeah,
nonetheless. I completely agree with you that for me something rings totally false here about Furio reciprocating this.
yeah,
Yeah, her developing feelings for him, I totally buy that. She's
yeah.
stifled in her
That's fine.
housewife role, and he is a handsome guy who's sort of part of her world, but has romanticism about him because he's from Europe and so forth. And I totally buy her getting fixated on him. Uh, and I could almost buy him being like kind of attracted to her, but I just don't buy this like soul connection between those
No,
two. Like
it
Carmela's a character
never.
with layers, but I don't think that she has the depth to like drive Furio to these depths of romantic melancholy.
No, it's like it does lead to that scene in the second to last episode where they're all at the casino, and they're
Mhm.
kind of all drunk, and there's the scene where it almost looks like Furio is contemplating throwing Tony into the helicopter blades. But really the only reason I like that
Oh, there's
is.
no almost about it. He's definitely contemplating it.
Oh yeah, yeah, he's definitely doing that. But what I like about that moment isn't so much the scene with Tony at the helicopter. It's the scene in the casino, and this is just brilliant for the show, where you have the one haughty girl mentions, oh, why don't you just have the helicopter take them, and that's how they're gonna, and then you get the annoyed casino boss who has to make this phone call and kind of describe like, oh yeah, they spent this much. I know she opened her mouth, she meant. It's great because how often on this show are like these managers or waiters, they're always just kind of kissing ass, and it's just like, oh, Mr. Soprano, it's so great to see you, and it's all just a bunch of bullshit because really they're either terrified of them, or they just want to please these mobsters so much. So it was just great to finally have a scene where somebody in this position is just like, oh, these annoying chumps, like why do we have to deal with them, and why are we going to spend so much to chopper them out of here? So that's one moment that came from the whole Furio Carmela bit that I guess is good. It doesn't really justify the entire subplot, but it's about the best thing that I feel we got out of that whole mess.
Well, one thing I think that played way better to me on rewatching now, like once the whole the whole series is completed, is that helicopter scene where Furios looks around and sees like all my problems could be solved right here. I have
Yeah.
plausible deniability. Tony's like stumbling drunk. Nobody's looking. Like, and he could have stumbled right in there. And I tried to catch him, but I couldn't catch him in time. And he's already talked with like his uncle back in Italy about how the only way he could be with the boss's wife is if the boss was dead.
Yeah.
And he doesn't go through with that. He's got a little too much whatever loyalty, professionalism. Even though he kind of hates Tony at that point, he's still loyal to the boss or whatever.
Yes.
We're just not willing to murder for, I guess, personal reasons. Obviously, he's willing to murder for money. Uh, it's almost professionalism more than anything. But the way that contrasts with how things will go down in the, I guess, avoid spoilers for the final part of the sixth season, but where Tony finds himself in a situation where he can rid himself of an annoyance
Right.
and does hardly hesitates at all to
No.
go ahead and
That
exercise that prerogative.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the big difference, between someone like Furio, who, even though he's a tough guy and has done all kinds of unconscionable things, still has something of a sense of right and wrong. Which, whereas Tony, that's gone completely. I mean, there's a few moments like that where things that happen this season sort of foreshadow into not just season 5 but even like season 6. Like there's the great episode, Everybody Hurts, where
Mm.
Artie has lent the money to the Frenchman, and there's the great kind of talk that he has with Tony, where Tony explains to him kind of the whole psychology of debtors, and how once they think they've given you anything, they act like they're doing you a favor.
Yeah.
And I like that because that the exact same thing as what Tony's doing later on when he borrows money from Hesh in the final season. Is he's acting the exact same way that he just told Artie. So that's so there are some moments like that in this season that pay off, or you can see they're sort of replicated in the later seasons. So yeah, I always love
Sure. There's
things like
also
that.
there's an already episode in the sixth season that is a pretty big retread of Everybody Hurts, down to like sexy hostess that he's
Yeah,
like silent lip
yeah.
to.
I mean, and they're both great because to me, anytime you can give Artie more stuff to work with, I'm fine with it, even if it's similar to something. I mean, that scene where he's kind of doing his Travis Bickle impression in the mirror, where
Oh
he's
yeah.
sort of he's sort of envisioning how it's going to look when he goes to the Frenchman, and is a qu'est-ce que c'est, message machine broken? Just that whole sort of, and he thinks that he's going to be the tough guy going in, and then how it
Yeah.
all plays out with him getting his earring ripped out. I mean, that's the more Artie, the better.
You're a big Artie fan, always have been.
Oh yes.
The one thing we've alighted up to this point is our normal question of who is the worst person in the world in this season.
Yeah. So for
And
me, well, you do you want to go ahead, or do you want me to go ahead and give an answer?
well, I think any we've said before that any season with Ralph Severetto in it, he's the front runner, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. It's 2 years running. I mean, you go with Ralph. I mean, I don't see any way around it.
Oh, I disagree. I think
Okay.
Ralph's actually on better behavior this year than he was last year. Uh, I mean, that's
Well,
a very very low bar to hurdle.
well, yeah. He goes from
But
killing strippers to a horse. So yeah, I guess that's
yeah,
slightly more
well,
improved.
but here's the thing. I actually pick my pick for worst person is Paulie because
He's
he
close.
is betraying the mobster oath. That is like one of the only redeeming characteristics of him is that he generally sticks to you know being a loyal soldier and family member to the other guys.
Yeah. Well,
Um, Also, he kills an old woman.
which I
He
mean,
murders an old woman with
we
his
gotta
hands.
talk about that scene, because it's like, boy, you're a lovable character when you can kill an old woman in her home completely unjustified. There's no reason at all, and people still love you. I mean that happens, and people are still like, "Oh, Paulie." I mean, that's how the audience is basically seeing it. It's like, "Oh, Paulie, you scamp."
It is. It's incredible. Oh, that is. It's a comic misadventure.
Oh, I mean, it's
It
just
is also
well,
the
it's so
home invasion murder of an old woman.
yeah. I mean, it's so great when the lady, she's walking down her hall, and she kind of notices somebody there, and he just gets up. He's all, "Man, your door was open." It's just it's at that. I mean, it's like one of the most fucked up moments in the show, but it's just amazing that something like that could happen, and and I'm the same way. You're just like, ah, I just love Polly too much. It's like, she was a mean old lady anyway. You kind of justify it in your head.
Exactly.
You're like, she was mean to Polly's mom, whatever. And it's that just goes to show you, man. This show is dealing with some real heavy talent when they can still make you love such a vile character.
Well, then the other thing is, I guess we should talk about the episode "Whoever Did This," which might be the best episode of the series. I
Yeah,
think it's a top
that's
five for anybody.
that's my favorite of this season, and it would probably be top five. I mean, that's kind of where that's the money shot episode of the season, for lack of a better
Yeah,
term. I mean, you finally get what we've been waiting for a long time, but between Tony and Ralph.
but you're of the opinion that Ralph did burn the stable down.
Oh yes, yeah. Well,
I don't think so.
but I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that as soon as Tony mentions, I don't know, was it Antonucci or whoever is the guy that they use sometimes to pull these kind of insurance fires, he mentions that name, and as soon as he mentions that name to Ralph, that's basically when Ralph knows that, okay, the jig is up. I mean, I'm got, and that's when he goes into basically justification mode and just starts explaining how, hey, this
No,
makes
no,
the
no,
best
no.
sense to anybody. Okay, you go ahead.
I think that, I mean, that's when he realizes what like he's being accused of, uh, and that the shoe kind of fits. However, I mean, they've said that the I mean, there's not a clear right answer here because David Chase would not tell Pantoliano whether he did it or not.
Yeah.
The episode is credited to two writers who apparently disagree on whether he did it or not. Pantoliano has said that he ultimately decided to play it like he didn't do it. And for me, part of the reason why I picked Polly, I think Polly did it
Why do you think Paulie did it?
because the episode opens with him, Ralph, figuring out
The
that
prank
he
call.
told the fat joke about Jenny Sack to Johnny Sack, and he makes a prank call to Tony or to Polly's mom. That's a really horrible thing. And then
Funny
Tony
though.
lays down the law and says, you can't touch Ralph because his son's in the hospital or whatever. And Polly kind of skulks off.
Yeah,
And
I
he
mean
would use the
that.
same arson guy that Ralph would.
Well, yeah, they're all going to use the same guy. I mean, there's how many famed mob arsonists are there in the area? I mean, there's maybe three or four probably that they would call upon to do such a deed. But no, I just think we see kind of the financial issues that Ralph is going to be going into with his son. We know that he's already kind of had issues with the horse and kind of the drag that it's been on him and his life. And to me, it's like it's a no brainer that he did it. I don't think Paul, even though we do see him kill an old lady early on, it just doesn't seem like Paulie's way to set fire that's gonna cook a horse while the horse is alive. I don't know. I just don't buy
Uh,
that it's Paulie.
I think it's exactly Polly's way. That he doesn't have the I don't know if it's guts, maybe it's unprofessionalism to go directly against Tony's orders, but he's going to get his revenge somehow.
But I will say though, what I love. I mean, the fight itself between Tony and Ralph is great. I don't know
Oh yeah,
why there aren't more kitchen fights just in film and TV in general. It just seems like such a great place to have a big fight scene. But I love what really triggers it and what really causes Tony to take his first crack at Ralph is he tells him, you're the one who eats beef and sausage by the carload. So it's basically a fat joke that does eventually kill Ralph. I mean, he tells the one about Ginny. He's able to evade that
yeah,
one, but finally, it's the fat joke at Tony's expense that does him in.
yeah, and that fight also is sort of reminiscent of the True Romance
Oh
hotel
yeah,
room fight that Feeney has, where it's sort of like they're grabbing everything off the shelves and spraying him in the eyes with aerosol cans. I think happens in both of them. He comes out ahead on this time though.
yeah, and you
He's
just
one and one.
you can see just that brute force that Tony has because we don't see that a whole lot in the show, especially later on because he's the boss. He doesn't really get very hands on, but man, just the way he's just kind of throwing Ralph around, it's you really get the idea that I mean, as if we didn't already know you don't fuck with Tony, but that it's they do a good job of showing just how big a man Gandolfini was at that point.
Yeah, and it is a brutal, like, great choreographed fight scene. Like, I mean, it's weird to praise the choreography in something that is choreographed to look like real and messy like this.
Yeah,
Uh,
but that takes a
but
lot of talent. Yeah, to make it look that good and make
yeah,
it so that we believe it. It's that's what's so good is that these are not professional fighters. These are just two mobsters
right.
who suddenly it's on and it doesn't look very they're not really like ballet dancers who are doing these great moves. It's just you grab whatever you can, use whatever you got in front of you,
Yeah,
and pray to holy hell that you end up on top at the end.
yeah, but it's not like shaky cam, like Born
No.
Supremacy style. Just
Oh
it's
no.
you can tell each move and like every like blow that lands and what
Oh
happens
right.
from point A to point B to point C. It's just done very well. The other thing is about that that's so incredible to me is, I mean, everything about it. I guess that the way that Chase is playing with like catharsis and his almost like belligerent approach towards conventional structure, that Not going to let it come to a head at the end of the third season and do it there. Not even going to have it come to a head at the end of the fourth season. It's going to be episode 9 out
Yeah,
of 13, which is a weird placement for that.
right.
But it is going to be this big climatic knockdown drag out fight that is like as big and brutal and bloody as the most bloodthirsty of the fans could have asked for, right?
Oh yeah, that was, I think whatever issues people may have had thinking, oh, they're just not giving us enough. They're not giving us enough violence this season. I mean, that episode
Yeah.
really they came through 100%. And yeah, it's early on in the season when it looked like Ralph was going to be killed because of the joke he told about Ginny, and then when that was sort of resolved, I think myself and I think a lot of people were kind of thinking, oh well, I guess Ralph is kind of safe for a while. He's come this close, and it's he's probably going to make it through the season now. And so I think it's pretty funny that it just takes a few more episodes for him to finally get what was coming to him.
And of course, the other like perverse thing about it is that we're finally giving you the big violent death of the character that everybody's been who's thirsting for his blood for 2 years now. But we're gonna spend the first 40 minutes of the episode like rehabilitating Ralph.
Oh yeah.
Sympathetic.
Yeah, well, it's also, yeah, we're gonna do it in the same episode where we kind of show him to be this concerned father, and we're gonna kind of
Mm.
give you an insight into his personal life, and so you get so much of that. Even though, man, it is kind of a cruel scene where Ralph kind of lashes out at the other kid in the hospital. That's one of those scenes where it's like,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, that's kind of a hard one.
but that's relatably cruel in a way that beating Tracy to death was
Oh,
not.
sure.
Um, but that's the other thing is that this is you can consider this a sort of unofficial sequel to the Tracy episode from last season.
Yes.
And certainly a lot of people have made a lot of hay out of like when Tony's
Pounding him, yeah.
beating Ralph to death.
Beautiful creature.
Yeah, he's just a beautiful innocent creature. What'd she ever do to you? And I think people like shit to be like, aha, see, they were arguing about the horse, but he's really talking about the stripper from last year, and
Yeah.
that's what that like Tony's anger really comes from, and all that. And like, yeah, that's kind of neat. I'm not saying it's not there. However, I think my interpretation, given how like dark the rest of the soul of the series is, I think it's a much darker interpretation is that actually Tony is thinking about the horse there.
Yeah,
Like,
I've always kind of thought now that I agree with you there. It's like I do think that for some reason, I mean, that's something they've always done with the show is Tony has
mhm.
this affinity for animals, and we see that over and over again. So yeah, I mean, not obviously we saw that he was extremely upset when Tracy was killed, but yeah, in that moment, I'm definitely thinking that it's more about the horse than Tracy.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously it plays into that. Like he's
It's
willing to
cumulative.
believe that Ralph did this to the yeah,
Yeah.
and part of the reason why he's so sure Ralph did this is because he knows he did that to Tracy. But I think his anger is more focused on the animal than the person. And
Yes.
and I think that's yeah. So I don't know. It's a little less exculpatory of Tony on a moral level than I think a lot of fandom has it.
Well, and then they spent so much time showing us how much Tony loved the horse, and
Oh
that
yeah.
that great shot of him kind of when laying down next to the horse, sitting down, and
Mhm.
so I think they went to so much lengths to show us how Tony felt about the horse that yeah I definitely think he's in it way more for the horse than for Tracy when he's finally wailing a wail on Ralph.
Yeah. And as the next episode, I think that intervention episode we were talking about, where he's in mourning
Oh
the whole time, bears out. Um,
yes.
so, did you ever make your pick for the worst person? You're saying Ralph?
I still say Ralph. I get where you're coming from with Paulie. I guess it's just I think me and a lot of other viewers we just really like Paulie, and it's like no matter what he does, nothing really nothing really upsets us
Nothing
too
sticks.
much. So I still say I'm still gonna stick with Ralph.
I think the only other candidate would be Janice, because she does some
Yeah.
pretty Machiavellian, like disgusting stuff, manipulating kids through
Yes.
the their mourning of their mother is
Yeah.
pretty pretty unforgivable. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, Janice is kind of always in the running. She's kind of like she's almost like the
mhm,
Susan Lucci of the worst person on
right,
Sopranos. She's always kind of in the running, but maybe just
yeah.
not quite there.
She's always a terrible bridesmaid, never a
Yes,
terrible bride.
yeah, that's I mean, yeah, it's hard to again because there isn't as much of the mob angle as in the previous seasons. It's like it's a little harder to come up with the truly rotten people this season.
Mm,
But yeah, I just I gotta go with Ralph. It's an easy one for me.
fair enough. Did you get a chance to talk about your highlight episode? We jumped around quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I know we kind of touched on it a little earlier, but I will go with Everybody Hurts. I think that
Right.
was, I think the way that they tie it in with with Tony learning about what happened to Gloria, and so now that's kind of putting him in the mood to oh well, the next time somebody has in my life is going through chaos,
Mhm.
I need to really help that person out. I like that part of it. I think it's just a great arty episode. I mean, there weren't too many of them, so he does some really funny work, and then also some really good dramatic work after he's made his attempt. So I think it's just a good showcase for him, and then the last bit with the Frenchman opening the door and and seeing Furio there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a great capper to that storyline. It's like they don't need to show us anything else aside from that.
Yeah, that is a pretty great just ending image.
Yes.
I think we should at least we got to make some mention of Whitecaps here.
Oh, of
I think
course.
that's
Yes.
one of the strongest episodes of the series. And this, I was kind of going to mention it earlier, there where the Furio storyline. Part of the reason why it doesn't bother me as much is because the way it comes out here in their fight, I think, is one of like the stronger scenes of the whole series. But again, it's not something that really requires Furio to be deeply in love with Carmela
Yeah.
for it to come out the way it does in that fight. Um,
Yeah. It's like yeah, like we were saying, I totally buy Carmela, and I have feelings,
mm,
and I get all that. That's fine. I like I said before, I never bought the Furio part of it. But yeah, in terms of in Whitecaps, when we're finally getting to the nitty gritty between Tony and Carmela, it's like whatever ammo they've got, they're using, and they're just kind of firing bullets left and right at each other, and it's great stuff. I mean, that's pretty much the high point of their scenes together. I mean, it's fascinating to watch. It's kind of rough to watch, but I mean that's what the show does. And yeah, it's incredible showcase for both of them.
yeah, and like I said, they're firing every bit of ammo they have. It's ammo that we have had for years to watch them accumulate.
Yep.
He's throwing stuff from the pilot episode at her, but
Hmm.
it's also not like overly neat that there's still occasionally pulling something from like way back before we became involved in their marriage as the audience,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
and it makes it believable in that way. But we are just they have built up these two characters so much by that point and their relationship that has all these layers that they can just sort of strip throughout that hour and change.
Right.
Uh, and man, it is as good of a breakup episode or movie as I've ever seen of anything.
Well, yeah, and it's also it's interesting because on the personal life side, you finally get the big showdown between Tony and Carmela, and that's wonderful. But then on the mob side, you're kind of waiting because you're thinking, oh, okay, they're going to take out Carmine. It's going to be, oh my gosh, so much is going on here. And so I think for that one to be resolved peacefully, I think is kind of is an interesting switch. Is on the domestic side, that's where the war takes place, whereas on the mob side, it's like, well, all right, we're going to meet in the middle here. we'll take whatever it was, 20%, and we're going to call it,
Mhm.
we're going to squash it. So I think it's kind of an interesting balance between those two sides of the show.
Yeah, and I think maybe they felt empowered to like all right, we're leaving nothing in the chamber on the marriage front. So maybe we can let the mob stuff fizzle out a little more.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know that. I think Chase might have done it anyway. Like,
right.
I don't think that he cares that much. He's like, I think he has a curiosity about how audiences react to these things and like likes to poke at it. But I don't
Yes.
think that he ever really cared if people were super happy with him at the end of any given episode
Oh,
or season.
for sure. But it's hilarious because they have this kind of peaceful resolution between Tony and Carmine, and then the first one of season 5, Carmine dies. It's like that's just kind of
Yeah,
a funny way of oh yeah, he's just going to die of a stroke here on the golf course.
yeah. Well, and it does. I mean, even though the mob stuff fizzles out, it upends the status quo of the show going into season 5 in a way that we've really haven't seen. I guess since the end of the first season was a pretty big upheaval.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I kind of forget that because it seems like the show settles back into its groove so quickly there. And but yeah, at the end of the first season, I guess the world is kind of turned upside down. That Tony's not with Melfi anymore, which happens again at the end of this season, and again at the end of the sixth season. Spoilers. Um, and Tony's taken over as boss, but he was already kind of boss anyway. So I don't know. In hindsight, I don't know. This feels like a bigger shift to the status quo than Tony
Yeah,
taking over the
because
family officially.
yeah, I mean this is certainly the biggest upheaval with his actual family, and they have never really done anything as big on that front, really. At least in terms of his nuclear family with Carmela and the kids. Um, but there's also I love the scenes between Tony and the next door neighbor lawyer. Those are some great scenes with
Oh
the
yeah,
that's just he's going to negotiate just like anybody else, and then just all those kind of things, and then him playing the Dean Martin music to drive the guy nuts. Those are some great bits from that episode.
yeah. That's a really an important thing. I remember watching the commentary on the DVD like 20 years ago, and Chase talking about how it's sort of important when Tony's getting run out of his own house, and the other thing like to end on asserting Tony's power in some form,
Yeah.
so that he's not like neutered to the in the
Yes.
audience's eyes going forward. Um, and it does that well without like being indulgently violent or anything. It's
Yeah.
actually kind of funny, kind of clever how he goes about that.
Yeah, and I don't know that actor's name, but the guy that plays the lawyer, I mean, I see him. He seems to play kind of the
Bruce
smart.
Altman.
Yeah, he seems to play kind of the smarmy guy a lot in movies and TV, and he was wonderful. He just had that type of
Yeah,
guy nailed down perfectly.
yeah. I mean, watch this episode, you can see why
Yes.
he gets that role. um, yeah, and there's good example of just like the Sopranos can pull a douchebag out of a hat from like any strata of society,
Oh, I
and it's
yes.
like, and I think this is again going back to my complaint about calling all cars. I think the crack addict end of the spectrum is about the only place where they falter in being able to just sort of immediately sketch in this like terrible person from this background with
Uh,
very little time devoted to
yeah.
it. It
Well,
feels
so
very broad there.
so are you talking about like with the whole the HUD, all that stuff when they're trying to clear out the houses?
Yeah.
See, to me, it's like, yeah, I know where you're coming from, but is it really that worse than kind of similar stuff that we were seeing at the same time on The Wire? I mean, when we think of like The Wire, we think of
Yes.
how, no, but there's a lot of stuff on The Wire that is not that far off from those scenes.
See, that's what I would have said at the time, I think. But looking back on the Wire is invested in the humanity of those gangster characters, like down the line in a way that the Sopranos. I mean, the Wire actually, for being almost as cynical as the Sopranos in a lot of ways, it has a better opinion of people, individual humans, whereas the Sopranos thinks individual humans suck, like
Yeah.
down to a person, more or less. Give or take a Melfi, maybe a Bacala. But I don't know that it just in the way that Bruce Altman captures this thing so quickly, and like, oh yeah, I know who this guy is and what kind of douche he is. Just and I don't know, just the teen gangbanger lingo they were throwing around there did not strike me as particularly authentic. Um,
I
in
think
any
it.
case,
Yeah, I mean,
I belabor that enough. It's like my only gripe with the whole season.
that's cool. That's cool. I don't cringe as much as that as a lot of the stuff in Christopher. So I guess we all have our different cringe points.
Well, I think we did it. I'll
Yeah.
see you for season 5.
Oh, absolutely.
Unless you,
That's five. That's my favorite one. So I'm definitely hyped for that one.
it might be mine too. I'm not. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get into
We
the
went. We
reasons.
came from season 3 feeling like they kind of ran together to me a lot, but there weren't a ton of standout episodes there. To where 4, I feel like it's very uneven, but the standout episodes are like a handful of the very best. And season 5, I think, has a stronger through line through the season.
Yeah,
And I remember like the highs being high and the lows being kind of low.
I just think top to bottom, that's my favorite. Like you said, 4 lots of great episodes, but like I said, just the fact that it has my least favorite episode and my least favorite subplot, that's kind of why I knock it down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there's between Whitecaps and whoever did this and Everybody Hurts. I mean, there's lots of great stuff to choose from this in the 4th season.
And the weight, that one is a
Yes.
really good one.
Oh
too.
yeah.
We didn't really talk about it.
Not really. I
love
mean,
that
the
episode.
the scene with the hitman family is a. I mean, there's like a whole 20 minutes on those folks right there, probably.
We don't got time though.
No.
So I guess now there's nothing to do except for just shout some pasta names at each other and go on our merry way. So
Yes.
Rigatini al Bosco, motherfucker.
Chef Boyardee, whatever. I think I'm gonna lose the battle of the pastas.
You're canceled, sir.
I'm sorry. I should have
All right.
I should have studied up that scene a little more.
All right, I'll talk to you later, man.
All right, let's take it easy.